And welcome to tonight's Bridge Show. It's Tuesday again, and we're on air live from our IP studio in Oslo with some amazing guests. So let the show begin. It's another one of those brilliant days. It's 1500 hours and you are watching The Bridge Show, where we have the amazing guest from Appear TV, Thomas Lind. Welcome.
Thank you, and thank you for having me on your show.
Oh, it's a pure pleasure, Thomas. We tried to actually get you earlier on the show.
Yeah, but I'm hard to come, you know.
I know, you're very busy.
I play difficult.
Well, I don't think you're playing.
It's to get the market value up.
Oh, well, your market value is rising and pretty high. The rumor goes that you got a new title at Appear TV.
That's true. My focus forward will be on product strategy and roadmaps and driving development as efficiently as possible. So
but that is excellent.
Title is called CPO for
But that suits you perfectly, because I remember, you know, in the last 20 years, we had more than one discussion about, you know, technology, where the direction goes and everything.
Well, that's true. That's what drives me. I mean, I started this and went into this business for technology.
Yeah.
Where does technology take you? What opportunity does it give? You know, where is it going? That's what I find the most interesting, put it that way, in this business.
But it is so interesting, because, you know, one thing is predicting, but one thing is also helping technology to actually move in that direction by actually doing it. It's a pretty important thing.
Yeah, it's very important, and that's what's unique about this, because you have a highly, let's say, expert customers that knows and have ideas and have clear vision of where they want to go, and then having the interaction with them, trying to see how we can take your own product portfolio to move into where they want to go. Yeah, I mean, in that mix, that's where it's fun. Yeah, and
it sure is kind of complicated, because one thing is that sometimes we love the customers, obviously we do, but sometimes, you know, the customer only sees one part of the goal. And sometimes you then have to think a bit wider than the exact needs of the customer to be able to, you know, change the future and actually make something new.
That's completely correct. And of course, what's fun with this interaction is that we can help them guide their way future and see other ways and other opportunities where they can utilize technology we have developed, which could help them in their environment and operation, and more efficient, more cost effective, you know, all of these things that are important at the end to be competitive.
It is sure important.
That's, I totally agree.
Yeah.
That makes this interesting.
We must touch on some small points before we go into the real nitty-gritty of what we're going to talk about. We've been working together for many years. You know, Appear TV was started the same year as Bridge.
Yes, we have the kind of same background, I would say.
I would say so, yes. You were in Tandberg Television. I was a customer of Tandberg Television.
Actually, I remember that very well. I introduced you into Tandberg Television.
Yes, you did.
I remember I got you to talk to Rolf, and you know, that's at that time that was all IP production and IP contribution.
Exactly.
And it was an interesting time.
I believe so. And the last kind of years, we also contributed on mutual platforms, because we created this ISM. You know, integrated services monitoring, where you can then monitor everything from satellite to terrestrial to cable to OTT, and of course contribution and compressed for that matter. And you have production equipment in all those spheres.
Yeah, you could say, as a company, we've been following each other from a technology point of view and market segment quite closely. We both started in the distribution chain, focusing on the cable and terrestrial and satellite operators, and you know, really the distribution of the content to the end customer. Then, as we matured, we started moving up the value chain, put it that way. So we're moving toward the production network and environment. And you started developing more monitoring and functionality into the production environment. We started making equipment that actually processed the data. So we always complemented each other, and in a very nice way. So we have more to gain by working together.
Oh yes, absolutely. No, and that has been very successful. For instance, you know, and we still have that beautiful 220 module which slips perfectly into
Yeah, I remember that
the XC5000 chassis.
I came back in the distribution time, put it that way, before we really had gone into contribution domain, and we had so many of the same customers.
Yes.
Of course, at that time, there was a lot of regional equipment. The XC was placed a lot in the regional cable head and regional terrestrial sites, whatever. And monitoring was important at these sites, but they would avoid having extra chassis, power, rack space. And so we came through and we agreed that you could make a module that could fit in to our chassis and save the space and reduce cost.
Absolutely.
Of the monitoring solution.
And a lot of the times that's about it. Reduce the complexity and reduce cost at the same time.
Yes.
So absolutely. No, that's been very, very successful. And yeah, so boy, oh boy. But we are here today to talk specifically about a new and fascinating technology that we love, of course, which is the JPEG-XS.
Yeah, I think that is, I mean, JPEG-XS is in some sense new, but it's also building on, I would say, JPEG-2000 and of course, Tico, which never really took off. But I think JPEG-XS is kind of the next step in contribution and light compression.
Absolutely, because first of all, it builds on the JPEG framework.
Yes.
And that means that it's very, very familiar type of bitrate reduction schemes. And of course, it's super low latency. Yeah,
that's maybe one of the big advantages compared to JPEG-2000. It actually is extremely low latencies.
Yeah, because that has been a deficiency with especially JPEG-2000 because again of its let's say there is quite a good bitrate reduction, but it uses of course huge frame buffers in each side, which is not ideal.
Nope.
But it was kind of okay when it came because it replaced.
Well, it was the best alternative.
Yeah, because the other alternative was good old MP
at that time.
Yeah. Oh, AVC, exactly.
AVC and
very, very heavy on latency. So we got then latency, of course. We got, of course, quality, because the quality is hugely improved as well. Yeah,
but quality is always a trade-off between bitrate, right?
Yeah, of course.
There's always a trade-off about delay, quality, bitrate.
Yeah.
But if you look at how the networks have expanded, how the IP network infrastructure worldwide is, exploding every year, if you can use that word, then...
They're not exploding, Thomas.
No, it's not exploding.
But it is rising fast.
Yeah, it's rising fast. Exploding is sudden.
An IP network will not explode.
No.
Don't be worried.
The capacity. but anyway, it's rapidly growing.
Yeah.
And of course, so bitrate is not as challenging as it used to be.
No.
Right? You don't have this huge limitation, but at the same time we know resolution have increased to 4K.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So the bitrate requirement to get the video is increasing also.
It's 4 times the HD.
Yeah, and when the 4K is 12 gig,
yeah,
a little bit less, but roughly 10 gig links won't.
No, it won't do.
So you're starting to have 40 and 100 gig links, but if you have no compression, there's a limited number even in 100 gig links.
Absolutely.
It limits the number of cameras you can transmit over that. And technology to go above 100 gig is still quite expensive. Put it that way.
Yeah, and actually both 40 gigs and 100 gig links are commercially very, very expensive when you talk about long haul. Exactly. So it's still not totally unobtainable, but it's very, very close. And 10 gig links is pretty much commodity.
Yes. And so with a light compression, and that is where JPEG-XS comes in with a really nice story. It compresses 10 to 15 times lossless in that area. And of course, then you're reducing the bitrate with factor of 10 then to make it just a round number. And that takes 12 gigs down to 1.2 gig.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you can fit many cameras in just a 10 gig link.
Yeah.
If you have a 40 gig link, you could probably cover whatever you need.
Yeah.
So, but I would also point there's another very important part of JPEG-XS compared to JPEG-2000. JPEG-2000 was based around the old, let's say, legacy or the traditional transport stream infrastructure.
Yeah, exactly. The transport stream encapsulation method.
And of course, it's a lot of things that happened in the studio over the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Let's say that. But with the introduction of 2110, especially.
Oh, absolutely. Especially that.
And the JPEG-XS, of course, then both kind of covers the new infrastructure option to transmit data and has a backward compatibility that can work in the old traditional transport stream based infrastructure.
Yeah, because
that's a really nice thing.
That's a very, very central point, because one thing is, of course, that when we had SDI-based production systems, you added a lot of latency just with the SDI signal, because that was kind of an embedded solution as well, because you had a frame buffer in every side of a cable system. So that means that you had a 2-frame delay if you just plugged it from the camera to the mixer.
Yep.
And then, of course, to the recorder, to the frame stores, to whatever. And that means that you had a very, not very low latency system.
Yes.
And then, of course, came 2110 and dramatically reduced that latency within the production system. Because again, you can then remove all the frame buffers here and there and have a much more real-time experience. And then suddenly your contribution links is the biggest problem you have when it comes to the latency.
You know, 2110 opens a lot of opportunities, but it also introduces a lot of challenges.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge you're sitting with. That you're now, if you know, from a projection environment, I would say the 2110 is a pretty ideal way. You're working with every asset independently.
Yeah.
You don't need to load every audio mixer with the video, etc. So it has some huge advantages. But of course, timing becomes
Absolutely.
the challenge.
Yeah, and then suddenly you're down to, you know, we're not talking milliseconds, we're talking then microseconds, and timing-wise, you preferably are sub-microsecond actually to synchronize sources. And that demands, of course, a much more stringent precision of all your equipment, and of course, not to mention the IP network.
And the distribution of a clock.
Yes.
Everybody agrees on, put it that way.
Yeah, that's very smart, because, you know, multiple clocks, not allowed here. So that's why they call it the grandmaster. Oh, sorry, the grand leader, basically, which is the new term.
The grandmaster? Are they changed?
Yeah, because, you know, master is not a good word.
Yeah.
So it's the grand leader and, of course, followers.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So, but apart from that, then you have the, of course, election mechanisms and all these very, very complex things that is necessary so that you can have one time source. But, you know, XS wasn't designed specifically to be used, let's say, in a normal production island. It was more to bind those islands together.
Yes, it's not really for communicating video data within the building, because there you can afford fiber and high capacity, and it's achievable to run uncompressed.
But then you suddenly...
But suddenly, if you do remote production, you have a stadium with X number of cameras.
Exactly.
These need also to be contributed into the studio. And then you are, again, somewhat often limited by the bandwidth available between the stadium and the studio, or the event and the studio. And there's where JPEG-XS comes in as a very lucrative alternative due to the low delay.
Yeah.
The factor 10 compression makes it affordable to get it over the network. And that's where we see it. But it's still a challenge that you see the network between these events are often rented, maybe not really in your
no, so they are actually then they're not kind of reoccurring events normally. So you
some
just
are. If you look at a soccer match, they happen every week.
But not every single hour of the day.
Not every single hour of the day. So sometimes they just rent the capacity for the event.
But that means also that you cannot expect the remote stadium to be part of the central timing structure and the clock structure in the studio.
You are not always in control of the network between the studio and the stadium. And that means distributing the PTP clock can be a challenge. And PTP is still a quite new standard, I would say. I mean, it's been for many years, but it still takes time to be fully supported in the network equipment.
Yeah.
And when you're renting the capacity, you're not in control of the physical equipment. You're just maybe renting a 10 gig link or whatever capacity you agreed on. And it's not a given that you'll be able to distribute the PTP clock between the events.
No.
And that's what I really like about the JPEGXS is that, okay, they said in this case, then keep using transfer stream, where all assets are bound together in one flow. You take away all the timing issues, and you can then run even two different PTP domains in the stadium and in the studio. With the frame store and support.
Yeah, and then frame synchronizes on the delivery at the studio, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah. But you can, and that's also the interesting thing. If you then, let's say, own your own network or have a very, very good link, you could potentially run the same time segment both at the venue and in the studio, and basically then have super low latency and also great precision in mixing cameras from multiple venues.
Yes. Definitely. That's why, if you own your own network, have control, have a built PTP domain between, one common PTP domain between the sites, you might as well run 2110.
But, this is so exciting.
And then, of course, you are much more in one environment, one network configuration. Everything is unified.
Yeah, and again, you can mix and match signals from wherever without any kind of delay or compensation, which of course takes time. But let's go back to one of the nice things, because you make so much cool stuff, and I kind of love the X20 platform because it's first of all, it's a monstrous platform. It's
we're very proud of the.
I can imagine, and because there you got 40 gig interfacing, right?
Yes.
And you got all the different modules.
Well, you can have 40, but you can also run 25 and 10 gig with the adapter.
Yeah. And of course, you got JPEG-XS in it, obviously, etc. But you have various flavors so that you can actually then run it with independent clock structures and then utilize the X20 as a frame synchronizer.
Yeah, we have two different hardwares.
Yeah.
Because as you mentioned, we talked about the network infrastructure at the studios are changing from traditional coax to IP 2110 based. But this takes time. This is a huge investment. It will take a long time before all studios are converted. So you still have for a long time these different infrastructures maybe on the two sides. Maybe you are doing studio to studio. It could be one studio was updated, the other one was not.
Exactly.
And so we have two hardware modules, one with the classic SDI coax front end, which can then take uncompressed 4K input or lower resolution and encode it to JPEG-XS. Embed it either into 2110. If your network structure between the encoder and decoder support 2110, you can run 2110, or we can embed it into TS.
Exactly.
And run TS between encoder and decoder.
But still with the same advantages on both quality and bitrate as normal
They
XS.
are the same codecs. They are totally independent on these two. And then we have another hardware module with a 40 gig front end or QSFP front end, which we then can do redundant 2022.7 reception. We can encode it into JPEG-XS again. Send it either as 2110 or TS to the decoder.
Exactly.
And you could even mix then having IP encoder and an SDI decoder.
Yeah.
So that you can convert, if your one studio has a 2110 where you are the cameras, but in the remote you have coax, you just use the two different modules. They are fully interoperable, and you select whatever transmission format you want between the encoder and the decoder.
It's very flexible.
And it's the same hardware, so you just load the software versions you want.
Yeah.
There are only two hardware modules. It can be loaded with either encoder, decoder, or it can be loaded with embedding into transport stream or in 2110.
Excellent. Well, that's pretty easy then. So if you have any kind of needs of JPEG-XS, do not look any further. Just write to Thomas and basically ask him for a demo. Well, actually, to your organization.
I would say probably to sales.
Yeah, probably better. But that is very, very exciting. We are, of course, also coming out with JPEG-XS in our VB440, which basically complements the gradual technology likeness that we have.
We both started with 2110 uncompressed, and then we started with, now it's JPEG-XS.
Yes. So again, look no further. We can help you, that's for sure. No, but this has been very, very enlightening, Thomas. Just before I let you go back to the busy work and all the new technologies you are having your fingers in developing, when do you see this? Let's not talk about explosions anymore. That's true. No.
Maybe a little bit exaggerated.
So, when do you think this market is really going to take off?
Well. Today, JPEG-XS has a fairly big market share.
Yeah.
Right, and it's not going to be replaced overnight.
No.
It's going to be gradually when they see the need. It's going to be like a continuous move from, I think, JPEG-XS, from JPEG 2000 to JPEG-XS. I think it's difficult to predict how many years it's going to take, but it's definitely not going to be an instant occurrence, because this ties up with the restructuring of their studios and the way remote production. Going from the traditional production on site to going to remote production. So it all ties together. Yeah. And what technology is supported in the different environments need to also be matching. So I think it's going to take time.
Yeah. We believe that it's going to take time, but we see already that there's a huge incentive as people are replacing their SDI islands with 2110 islands, and then suddenly need more, let's say, intelligent contribution solutions. And of course, bandwidth is still expensive, so
and we already talked about 8K.
Yeah. That's very true.
And that's that's 4 times 4K. So
any 8K plans right now?
We are looking at the market, but there are ways to do it with quad 4K.
Yeah, quad link, of course. And then
we do support that actually today. So we have done demos on our HVC encoder in 8K.
That brings me to something. I'm sorry, because I forgot one very important point, because it's just we are weeks, or actually a couple of months away from the fantastic Summer Olympics.
Yes.
And you guys were, of course, represented on doing some very, very cool stuff between the venues and the IBC.
Yeah, it was actually a very interesting event that really our customer was Mobile Link that had LiveLike as their customer.
Yeah.
But the whole concept was they wanted to demonstrate 360 3D. So
really?
360 with 3D.
Oh, right.
Which is
how many Ds are that? That's kind of 6D or something. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, so it was really stereo cameras. So 2 cameras in 5 position, I think it is. And it was a jig. Probably seen this. We don't make those. So it was there. But essentially, out of this this installation came 10 4K camera feeds.
Yeah.
And these need to be contributed into the broadcast center. There was 80K, and they selected to use our JPEG-XS with 2110 encoding and decoding in each end, and it was very successful. We got the feedback from the operator that they were so stable that they didn't even bother to go to the studio, the stadium at the end. They just remotely controlled it because there was so much, of course, COVID restriction to go to the stadium, so it wasn't then easy to get access. No. So they had to.
No, but that's one of the incentives again, because this is a very, very important part. It needs to be extremely reliable when you deal with these high-value signals. That's of course a given.
It must work during the event, because as you say, they're high-valued events. So it's a crisis if they don't work. So we were very happy with this. They were very happy. We got very good feedback from end customers, and it was used actually for multiple applications. It was resold to other broadcasters that used it. So it was a very cool event for us. They had actually 2, to be honest. They also had two installation, one with the 3D 360, and then they had the 2D 360. So they always covered 2 events. So they covered, I think, 2 or 4 events per day.
Wow.
So, and this was every day and done.
That's just amazing. I'm very, very impressed. But then again, I'm impressed by the X20 platform anyway, so that is pretty cool. Thomas, was we can be sitting here for hours talking about these things.
You can always talk technology. That's fun.
Oh yeah, but we'll do this over a glass of champagne another day, absolutely, and continue to talk. And of course, that's all for this episode of the Bridge Show. But we have a short kind of teaser for you, because on the next show, this is going to be on. Next week on The Bridge Show, we will talk about T2 and, of course, the IP things about T2 and T2MI. Ho, ho, ho! So don't forget to tune in next Tuesday for The Bridge Show, live from our IP studio in the basement of our wonderful HQ here in Oslo, Norway. Thank you very much, Thomas, for joining us here at the show. It was a pure pleasure. Oh, it will be. You will get more invites. I can definitely see that. So thank you very much. And again, don't forget to tune in next Tuesday, and see you later.